So we are going to finish our discussion of the 1920s with the economy, and we can't talk about the economy of the 1920s without discussing the stock market crash of 1929. This was an integral event that led to the Great Depression of the 1930s. In the 1920s, many Americans were enticed by the riches and wealth that were occurring during this decade. Many people invested beyond their means, and they invested with money they did not have. Banks would do the same thing and bet that the stocks would continue to go up and up and up, and investors did it as well. They could never foresee that a crash in the stock market would happen. But when the stocks crashed in 1929, the banks lost a lot of money. Customers ended up hearing about it and feared for their own money. Please keep in mind that people invested in banks, and some people, it was their life savings that were invested in banks, and they feared that their own money would be lost, and they started to go to the banks and pull out their money. And this lack of confidence in the security of banks turned into panic. Everyone wanted their money at once, and the banks could not cover the withdrawals, and this is what was called a bank run. And this idea of that people were taking out money faster, or all at once, I should say, and the banks couldn't cover that money, that was called a bank run, and this led to the bank's collapse. By 1933, so a little bit out of the 1920s, we saw that 4,000 banks had closed and left many people poor and in great despair. Many people lost their life savings. And this all occurred on October 29th, 1929, which will forever be known as Black Tuesday. And this is where basically investors traded some 16 million shares on Wall Street at the New York Stock Exchange in a single day. Now, that was a huge amount. Billions of dollars were lost that day, and that wiped out thousands of investors. In the aftermath of Black Tuesday, America and the rest of the industrialized world spiraled downward into what was called the Great Depression, and that lasted for a decade. 1929 to 1939, and it was the deepest and longest lasting economic downturn in the history of the Western industrialized world up until that time. Of course, in our study of the 1930s, we will see that President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, also known as FDR, tried to instill some social reforms that would help people during this time of the Great Depression. But in all honesty, the only thing that got us out of it was the entry into World War II. And we will certainly be discussing that as we talk about the 30s, and that will be in our next series, and that will we will be talking about the 1930s next. Thank you.